My aunt left me her estate. Now my brother says I manipulated her will. Imagine honoring a loved one's final wishes, only to have your own brother turn it into a public smear campaign, accusing you of manipulation and greed. My Aunt Mara was clear about her privacy and her will, but after she passed, Julian couldn't accept that I was chosen over him. This isn't just about money, it's about loyalty, integrity, and the devastating impact of family gaslighting when someone doesn't get what they feel entitled to. Throw away because my brother watches everything I post and somehow always finds out when people talk about him. 32F was never the loud one in my family. I'm not the storyteller, not the entertainer, not the one people expect to carry conversations. That has always been my older brother, Julian, 36M. He's the kind of person who can walk into any room and make it feel like he belongs there. People trust him fast. People defend him fast. I've always been the one who gets described as private or hard to read, which is polite family language for not as likable. Our Aunt Mara was different with me. She didn't like noise. She didn't like surprises. She didn't like people showing up unannounced or making decisions for her. Most of the family took that personally and stopped trying. I didn't. I liked that she was straightforward. If she wanted space, she said it. If she needed help, she asked directly. We didn't do emotional speeches or dramatic gestures. We did short calls, quiet visits, and boring errands. I helped her with paperwork sometimes, sorting documents, calling service numbers when she didn't feel like being on hold, writing down things she wanted to remember to do later. Not because I was in charge of her life, but because she asked and I said yes. Julian was around for birthdays and holidays and big family things. He brought gifts, made jokes, took photos. He wasn't checking in on random days or handling logistics, and I'm not saying that makes him a villain, but it does matter later. When Mara's health started going downhill, she told me first. She was very clear that she didn't want it turned into a family emergency broadcast. She said she didn't want people showing up to make themselves feel better. She wanted things calm. I didn't argue with her about it. I didn't go behind her back. I respected what she asked. Julian knew she wasn't well. He just didn't know details because she didn't want to give them. When she passed, the will was already settled. She left me the majority of what she had. Not some massive fortune, not early retirement money, but enough that it definitely changed things for me. Julian wasn't cut out. He got personal items she'd set aside and a smaller amount of money. At first, Julian didn't say anything. Then he asked to meet and said he just wanted to understand. He said he felt shocked and hurt and confused. He said he thought he and Mara had a good relationship too. He said it felt like I had somehow been chosen over him. I told him she made her own decisions. He said, yeah, but you were with her a lot. That matters. I said, being around someone doesn't mean controlling them. He said, I'm not saying you controlled her. I'm saying you influenced her. I told him she wasn't a child and she didn't need someone to tell her what to do. He nodded, but his face had that tight look he gets when he thinks someone is being fake with him. He said, I just wish I had known things were that bad. I would have done more. I said, she didn't want a crowd. He said, or maybe she didn't want to deal with family pressure. That's when I realized the conversation wasn't actually about understanding. It was about setting up a version of events that made him feel less responsible. After that, people started acting different toward me. Not openly hostile at first, just distant. Messages left on read. Invitations that used to include me suddenly not including me. Then one of my cousins asked if everything was okay between me and Julian because he seemed really upset about how things went down. I asked what that meant. She said Julian told her he barely got to see Mara near the end because I kept visits private and didn't tell people how bad things were. I stared at my phone for a long time before answering. Then I messaged Julian and said, why are you telling people I kept you away from her? He replied, I didn't say you kept me away. I said you were very protective of her time. I said, you're making it sound like I blocked you. He said, I'm describing how it felt from my side. I said, your feelings don't change what actually happened. He said, you were always the gatekeeper with her. That word made my stomach flip. I said, she asked for privacy. That was her decision. He said, funny how that worked out in your favor. That's when I told him to stop implying I engineered the will. He replied, I'm not implying anything. I just think it's strange that the quiet one ends up with everything. I said, not everything. And this isn't a popularity contest. He said, it kind of is when family is involved. After that, he stopped talking to me directly and started talking around me. Friends of the family started messaging things like, I heard there was a lot of tension before Mara passed, and it must have been hard carrying all that responsibility alone. People who had never once asked me how I was doing suddenly had opinions about what I did or didn't allow. Then Julian messaged me again and said maybe the cleanest solution was to split what I got so nobody feels uncomfortable. Not asking, framing it like problem solving. I told him no. He said, so you're okay benefiting from a situation where I didn't get a fair chance? words. I said, you had chances. You chose how you used them. He said, you're really cold about this. I said, you're really selective with memory. He said, there it is. You always think you're the only one who sees things clearly. I said, no, I think you hate not being the main character in this story. That's when he stopped pretending to be calm. He said I was selfish, calculating, and good at playing innocent while getting what I want. I told him he was rewriting events because he didn't like the outcome. He said, you were never close to anyone else in the family. Of course she listened to you more. I said, she listened to herself. He said, you don't even hear how arrogant you sound. I said, you don't hear how entitled you sound. Then he started telling people that I took advantage of being the only one she trusted. Not that I manipulated her directly, just enough suggestion that people filled in the blanks themselves. Someone messaged me on Instagram and asked if it was true that I discouraged visits so I could manage things privately. Another asked why I didn't tell people how sick she was if I really cared. I messaged Julian and told him to stop poisoning people against me. He said, if people are questioning things, that's not my fault. I said, you are literally the one feeding them this version of events. He said, I'm not responsible for how people interpret what I say. I said, you are responsible for what you say. Then he said something that flipped the whole tone. He said, if you weren't hiding anything, you wouldn't be so defensive. That's when I lost it. I told him he was being reckless with accusations because he didn't get the payout he wanted. He told me I was greedy and using technicalities to justify keeping what I didn't earn. I told him, you don't get to show up late and demand a prize. He said, you don't get to act like a martyr when you clearly benefited. I said, you benefited too, just not in the way you wanted. Then he started talking about how people always liked him more and how I was always jealous of that. Like this was suddenly about childhood competition instead of actual adult behavior. I told him, this isn't about popularity. This is about you being mad that someone chose me for once. He said, you really think you deserve more than me? I said, I think she decided what she wanted to do with her own life and her own money, and you can't stand not being centered in it. After that, he stopped messaging me and started posting vague stuff on Facebook about betrayal, family disloyalty, and people who pretend to be quiet while doing damage behind the scenes. People commented things like, some people don't show their true colors until money is involved, and that's heartbreaking when family turns on you. I didn't comment. I didn't like the posts. I didn't react. But I started getting private messages asking if everything was okay and if there was another side to what Julian was going through. I finally replied to one and said, there is another side, but I'm not turning this into a public argument. That message got screenshotted and sent to Julian. He messaged me and said, so now you're playing the bigger person while letting everyone think I'm unstable. I said, you are literally posting about me without naming me. He said, if the shoe fits. I said, then own what you're saying instead of hiding behind quotes. He said, you wouldn't survive a direct conversation. I said, you wouldn't survive being told no. Then he told me that if I didn't agree to split things, he would stop protecting my reputation and let people draw their own conclusions. I told him, you're not protecting anything. You're threatening me. He said, call it whatever you want. I'm done carrying this alone. I said, you created this. He said, you finished it. That was the last direct message I got from him. Update 1. Family friend Nora messaged me out of nowhere asking if everything was okay between me and my aunt before she passed. That already felt weird because we weren't the kind of family that did emotional check-ins. I asked what she meant and she said, Julian mentioned he was worried your aunt didn't get to talk to people much near the end. That didn't even sound like an accusation. It sounded like concern. Soft, gentle concern. The kind that makes you sound heartless if you snap at it. I told Nora that my aunt asked for privacy and that I followed what she wanted. Nora said, that's not what Julian said. He said you were handling her messages and deciding who could talk to her. That was the first time I realized what he was actually doing. He wasn't saying I was controlling. He was saying I was handling things. He wasn't saying I isolated her. He was saying she was isolated. Every sentence was built so he could deny he ever blamed me directly while still making me the obvious villain. I messaged Julian and said, why are you telling people I controlled who talked to her? He replied, I didn't say that. I said you were the point of contact. I said, that's the same thing and you know it. He said, you're being defensive. I'm just being honest about how things looked from the outside. That pissed me off because he hadn't been on the outside. He had chosen not to be around. He didn't visit. He didn't check in. He sent the occasional hope you're doing okay text and thought that counted as involvement. So I told him exactly that. I said, said, you weren't around because you didn't want to be. Don't pretend you were locked out. He said, I wasn't given opportunities. I said, you weren't given reminders. Big difference. Then he flipped it on me and said I was making it about myself and that I always had to be right. I told him, you're making it about you by rewriting what happened. He told me I was emotional. I told him he was passive-aggressive and hiding behind polite language because he didn't have the guts to say what he actually meant. Then things got louder, not literally yelling because it was messages, but the energy absolutely shifted into yelling. He said, you always think you're the only one who cared. I said, you always think caring means showing up when it's convenient and disappearing when it's not. He said, you think you're better than everyone. I said, no, I think I actually did the work while you were busy protecting your image. That's when he stopped replying to me and started talking to other people instead. Within 2 days, I had 3 separate relatives asking if it was true that my aunt had been cut off. One of them straight up asked if I had discouraged visitors. Another asked if I was overwhelmed and needed help, but in that fake polite way where you can tell they already believe something bad happened. I realized Julian wasn't venting. He was planting seeds. So I confronted him again, and this time I didn't keep it polite. I said, you're implying I trapped her socially and you're doing it on purpose. He said, I'm saying you controlled access. I said, she controlled access. He said, but you were the gatekeeper. I said, I was respecting her boundaries. You were respecting your own comfort. He told me I was twisting his words. I told him he was twisting reality. He said I was being hostile. I said he was being manipulative and cowardly. Then he dropped the next move. He contacted the person managing the estate and said he was concerned about undue influence and wanted things reviewed. Not because he had proof, because he had a storyline. I found out because I got notified that questions were being raised about whether my aunt had been isolated by me and whether decisions were made under pressure. I saw that message and my hands were shaking. Not sad shaking, angry shaking. I messaged Julian and told him he had officially crossed a line. I said, you're accusing me of exploiting her now. Say it with your chest instead of hiding behind legal language. He said, I'm protecting her memory. I said, no, you're protecting your ego because you can't stand that she trusted me more than you. He told me that was cruel. I told him cruelty would have been abandoning her and then pretending to be a victim after she died. He said I always thought I was superior. I said, you look down on yourself and I'm just convenient to blame. He said, you've always wanted to be the victim. I said, you've always wanted to be the hero even when you weren't there. That's when his partner, Elise, entered the situation. She messaged me saying Julian was spiraling, not sleeping, and taking this really hard and that I should just be more understanding. I told her I wasn't responsible for managing his emotions. She said, you know how sensitive he is about family stuff. I said, then maybe he shouldn't be accusing me of manipulation to people who control money. She said he wasn't accusing, he was just asking questions. I said, funny how the questions all point at me. Then she hit me with, would it really hurt you to give him something so this can calm down? Quick pause before this gets worse. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to like and subscribe. Trust me, it only escalates from here. That's when I lost whatever patience I had left. I replied, so the plan is I pay him to stop lying about me? She said, you're being harsh. I said, no, I'm being accurate. She said, he feels like he was erased. I said, that's not my fault and it's not something money fixes. She said I was escalating things. I said he escalated when he went to the estate manager instead of talking to me like an adult. Then Julian messaged me again, and this time he wasn't subtle at all. He said, if you cared about family at all, you'd stop being stubborn and fix what you broke. I said, you broke this when you decided sympathy was more important than honesty. He said I was selfish and calculating. I told him he was dramatic and desperate for attention. He said I was cold. I said he was reckless with other people's reputations. Then he said something that finally made it clear this wasn't about my aunt at all. He said, you were always invisible. Now you get to be important and you can't stop rubbing it in. That hit because it was pure jealousy, not grief, not concern, not confusion. Just resentment that I was the one who mattered at the end and he wasn't. I told him, you weren't invisible. You were absent. That's not the same thing. He said I loved acting superior. I said, no, I'm tired of being punished because you regret your own choices. He told me I was cruel. I told him, then stop forcing me to defend myself from your fake concern campaign. After that, he stopped messaging me entirely, but he didn't stop talking. I started seeing vague posts on Facebook about family members who isolate elders and people who hide behind being the helper while cutting everyone everyone else out. No names, but everyone who knew the situation knew exactly who it was about. Then an old friend messaged asking if everything was okay and if I was stressed from all the responsibility, which told me the narrative was spreading way wider than just relatives. Update 2. It all blew up 2 weeks after Julian started his quiet campaign. I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a post from a cousin tagging half the family. The caption was subtle but vicious. Funny how some people get rewarded for being helpers, while others are left wondering why they mattered at all. The comments were worse. People I barely talked to chimed in about family loyalty and doing the right thing, clearly pointing at me without naming me. I lost it. I started replying publicly, calling out every insinuation. I wrote things like, "Stop twisting care into control." I followed her wishes, unlike some people who vanish when it's inconvenient. The responses exploded. Julian tagged his friends in replies, calling me cold, manipulative, and self-important. One cousin, who had been neutral, started demanding me, saying I was destroying family peace for ego. I replied bluntly, "I didn't destroy anything. You just like believing a lie because it's easier than acknowledging the truth." Then he tried to escalate legally. Julian messaged the estate lawyer again, claiming new testimonies had surfaced suggesting undue influence. I sent the lawyer scan logs of texts and receipts showing every appointment, grocery run, and check-in. I even included notes my aunt had left saying she wanted me to manage things quietly. The lawyer called me personally, saying everything was airtight. Julian's complaint was dismissed before it even reached court. But the real war started when Julian called my work. He tried to frame me as untrustworthy and aggressive, claiming my manipulation might affect professional relationships. HR called me to clarify the situation. I didn't back down. I forwarded every text, every timeline, every proof of my aunt's instructions. I reminded them he had not contacted me professionally about work, only personally. My supervisor, after reading everything, said they were shocked at his audacity and supported me fully. I fired back with a message to Julian, "Dragging work into this makes you pathetic, not clever." Julian's partner, Elise, got involved again. She texted me late one night, "Please just split it. You don't have to ruin him completely." I replied, "I'm not ruining him. He's doing that himself by lying and dragging everyone into his fantasy." She tried to guilt me, saying Julian was stressed, losing sleep, and that I could prevent family division. I sent back screenshots of his private Instagram posts showing him out at dinner, laughing with friends, clearly fine. Her tone shifted instantly. The final straw came when Julian decided to confront me face to face at a distant relative's gathering. He cornered me in the kitchen, voice rising so loudly people from the living room could hear. He said, "You're ruining this family. You're proud, arrogant, and greedy." I didn't flinch. I yelled back, "I'm following her wishes. You're rewriting reality. Stop pretending your jealousy is justice." People started watching. Some gasped, others recorded bits on Snapchat. Julian's face turned red. He snapped at me, "You think you're better than me." I leaned close and said, "Better? No. I just actually show up when it matters instead of acting the hero afterward." He lunged toward me aggressively. I stepped back and shouted, "Stay in your lane before you make yourself look like a fool." By now, half the room was watching. Someone posted a live clip on Instagram, and it started going viral in the family group chats. After that confrontation, Julian realized he couldn't bully me in person without making himself look ridiculous. He retreated, but the online side battle continued. Family group chats erupted with screenshots, accusations, and defenses. I called him out publicly every time. "You're lying. You're manipulating. Stop hiding behind grief to smear me." Some relatives started blocking him. Others left the chats entirely. By the end of the week, the momentum had flipped. The estate questions were officially closed the following week. The lawyer sent out a final memo confirming everything I had done was documented, authorized, and aligned with my aunt's wishes. Julian tried one last time to get support from extended family via Facebook, but people ignored him. His posts became defensive, petty, and more revealing of his jealousy than anything else. I didn't apologize. I didn't offer a cent. I didn't split anything. I posted a message publicly on Instagram clarifying the facts, without naming him directly, about how my aunt's decisions were documented and that respecting her wishes mattered more than performing for anyone else. The post went unnoticed by most of the family except a few supportive friends who liked and commented, giving me quiet validation. Julian saw it. He didn't reply. He never contacted me again. The end. Julian's a loudmouth spotlight chaser who showed up for selfies and holidays, ghosted the real work, then threw a 6-month tantrum when quiet you got the inheritance for actually being there. He ran a slimy whisper campaign calling you a controlling bitch, tried legal whining, called your job, and finally screamed in a kitchen like a toddler denied candy, while you dropped receipts and let him bury himself. He's jealous you finally got centered for once. Pathetic. Verdict. NTA. You honored her wishes, kept your spine, didn't pay off his bullshit. He earned every L. Keep the money, block the drama, live better. End of story. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite.